The conflict that erupted in late 2023, a maelstrom of violence and geopolitical tension, quickly became a focal point of global attention. The initial strikes, the mobilization of forces, and the rhetoric from both sides painted a picture of a decisive and swift resolution. However, as the weeks turned into months, the reality on the ground began to diverge sharply from the initial projections. It was framed, at least initially, as Israel's final battle to eradicate Hamas from Gaza. The stated objective was clear: to dismantle the organization's infrastructure, eliminate its leadership, and ensure the long-term security of the Israeli population. Military strategists spoke of precision strikes, targeted operations, and a comprehensive plan to neutralize the threat. Yet by mid-2025, the outcome was a painful, protracted withdrawal. The promised swift victory had dissolved into a grinding stalemate, characterized by heavy casualties, widespread destruction, and a growing sense of disillusionment within Israeli society. The withdrawal was not a triumphant return, but a somber retreat. It was far from the promised victory. The atmosphere in government buildings was heavy with disappointment, the faces of officials etched with the weight of the unfolding failure. The initial optimism had evaporated, replaced by a grim recognition of the strategic miscalculations that had led to this point. Israel, by its own standards, lost the war. The goals set at the outset remained unmet, the security situation arguably worsened, and the international standing of the nation significantly diminished. The lowering of the flag became a symbol of this profound setback. Military miscalculation, a series of strategic errors and flawed assumptions, played a significant role in the unraveling of the initial plan. Political paralysis, the inability of the government to forge a unified strategy and maintain public support, further hampered the war effort. And growing global isolation, the erosion of international support, and the increasing condemnation of Israel's actions, all played a role in sealing the fate of the campaign. The IDF, one of the world's most powerful armies, equipped with state-of-the-art technology and a reputation for unwavering resolve, was bogged down in an asymmetric conflict it couldn't win. The urban landscape of Gaza, a labyrinth of tunnels and densely populated areas, proved to be a formidable challenge. Internal political divisions fractured national unity, creating deep rifts within Israeli society and undermining the sense of collective purpose, and ultimately undermined the war effort, as infighting and disagreements within the government hampered decision-making and strategic planning. International pressure mounted, fueled by growing concerns over the humanitarian situation and the disproportionate use of force, turning from quiet diplomacy to sanctions and condemnation, isolating Israel on the global stage, and further complicating the already dire situation. The human cost was staggering, with thousands of lives lost and countless more shattered by the relentless violence. Gaza endured devastation and loss, its infrastructure decimated and its population displaced, leaving behind a landscape of rubble and despair. While Israeli society suffered deep scars, grappling with the trauma of loss, the erosion of security, and the profound moral questions raised by the conflict. And a shattered sense of security, as the illusion of invincibility crumbled and the threat of future conflict loomed large. The war redrew lines of conflict, shifting alliances and exacerbating existing tensions across the Middle East, creating a new, unstable reality characterized by heightened uncertainty and the potential for further escalation. The lessons of this defeat will shape the region for generations, influencing political calculations, military strategies, and the prospects for peace, forcing all sides to confront hard truths about the complexities of the conflict, the limitations of military power, and the urgent need for a sustainable solution. This is the story of how a promised victory, declared with unwavering confidence and a sense of righteous purpose, became an unwinnable war, a tragic illustration of the futility of violence and the enduring power of human resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering. Israel's initial strategy relied heavily on the application of overwhelming force, a doctrine deeply ingrained in its military history. The assumption was that a swift and decisive display of power would quickly cripple Hamas's capabilities and force them into submission. This approach, however, underestimated the depth of Hamas's preparations and the complexities of urban warfare within the dense confines of Gaza. The opening phase involved intense airstrikes. This was followed by a ground invasion, pushing deep into the heart of Gaza. The aim was to dismantle Hamas's infrastructure and eliminate its fighters. But Hamas, having prepared for years, was deeply entrenched, fighting from a vast and intricate network of tunnels beneath the city. These tunnels served as both defensive positions and launch pads for attacks. This subterranean labyrinth effectively neutralized Israel's technological edge, rendering advanced surveillance and weaponry less effective. The tunnels allowed Hamas fighters to move undetected, appearing and disappearing at will. The IDF found itself bogged down in a brutal, close-quarters fight, a stark contrast to the open battlefields they were accustomed to. Every street, every building became a potential battleground. They were constantly facing ambushes and booby traps lurking at every turn, turning the urban landscape into a deadly maze. The war quickly devolved into a slow, grinding battle of attrition, a war of inches fought house by house, street by street. This relentless conflict was draining lives and morale as the initial optimism faded and the reality of the situation set in. Hamas's strategic goal was not to achieve outright victory, but rather survival and inflicting steady casualties on the IDF. They weren't aiming for outright victory, but by dragging Israel into a drawn-out conflict, they aimed to exploit the vulnerabilities of a prolonged occupation. They sought to erode public and political support back home in Israel, increasing pressure on the government to withdraw. Destroying Hamas proved to be an impossible task, because it was more than just a military force. It was a deeply rooted movement, interwoven into the social fabric of Gaza. The IDF controlled ruins, not peace, a landscape of devastation that offered little in the way of security or stability. And they faced daily attacks with no end in sight, a constant reminder of the unresolved conflict. High casualties and nightly news coverage fueled dissent within Israel, turning public opinion against the war. The war became a political marathon, a test of endurance for the Israeli government and its people. It was not a military sprint as initially envisioned. The illusion of a quick, decisive victory vanished, replaced by the grim reality of a protracted and costly conflict. Israel learned at great cost that there was no purely military solution to Gaza, that the complexities of the conflict demanded a more nuanced approach. The War of 1,000 Cuts left both sides bleeding, a testament to the futility of endless conflict and the urgent need for a lasting peace. As the IDF struggled in Gaza, Israel's government was paralyzed by infighting. The emergency unity government, a fragile alliance, split over Gaza's future. Hardliners pushed for permanent occupation, centrists wanted a diplomatic exit. The lack of a clear political endgame left the military without direction. Hostage families and mass protests demanded a deal, deepening divisions. The government couldn't commit to negotiations or military pressure, eroding public trust. Eventually, the unity government collapsed, replaced by a weaker, more isolated coalition. Political chaos became a public spectacle, undermining the war effort. The world saw a nation divided, unable to sustain a costly, open-ended conflict. Israel's defeat was forged as much in Jerusalem as on the battlefield. Israel began the war with strong international support, especially from the US and Europe. But as civilian casualties in Gaza mounted, global opinion shifted sharply. Images of destruction and humanitarian crisis fueled outrage and condemnation. The US, once unwavering, imposed conditions on military aid and criticized Israel publicly. International courts launched investigations, and arrest warrants for Israeli leaders followed. Sanctions and arms embargoes spread across Europe and the global South. Even the Abraham Accords froze, as Arab states condemned Israel's actions. Diplomatic isolation left Israel with few allies and mounting pressure to withdraw. Global opinion became a decisive force in ending the war. The sudden outbreak of war sent shockwaves through Israel, triggering not only a security crisis, but also a significant economic downturn. The initial days saw a dramatic shift in the nation's financial landscape, as businesses grappled with uncertainty and consumers tightened their belts. The immediate mobilization of hundreds of thousands of reservists, while crucial for national security, had a profound impact on the civilian workforce. Key industries found themselves short-staffed, and the ripple effects were felt across various sectors. This mass mobilization effectively gutted the workforce, leaving many businesses struggling to maintain operations and meet customer demands. The absence of such a large segment of the population created a void that was difficult to fill. The situation was particularly crippling for key sectors like tech, a cornerstone of the Israeli economy. With many employees called to duty, innovation slowed, projects stalled, and the industry faced unprecedented challenges. Tourism, another vital sector, also suffered a major blow. daily military costs soared to unprecedented levels, placing immense strain on the national budget. This surge in military spending inevitably meant that resources were diverted from essential public services, draining funds from education, healthcare, and critical infrastructure projects. The long-term consequences of these budget cuts were a growing concern. As uncertainty mounted, international investment dried up, further exacerbating the economic woes. Investors grew wary of the instability and chose to hold back, impacting growth. Consequently, credit ratings fell, reflecting the increased risk and instability within the Israeli economy. The combined effect of security concerns and economic uncertainty led to the collapse of the tourism industry. Ben Gurion Airport, usually a bustling hub of international travel, emptied out as major airlines canceled flights, leaving travelers stranded and further isolating the nation. The economic pain deepened existing social tensions, creating a volatile atmosphere within the country. The cost of living soared and unemployment rates rose sharply, placing immense pressure on families and individuals. Small businesses, the backbone of the Israeli economy, shuttered their doors, unable to withstand the financial strain. The economic burden fell hardest on lower and middle-class families, who struggled to make ends meet amidst rising prices and job losses. Economic hardship fueled anti-war protests, as citizens voiced their frustration and demanded an end to the conflict. These protests were often intertwined with calls to bring the hostages home, highlighting the deep emotional toll of the war. The government faced a war on two fronts, a military conflict in Gaza and a looming economic collapse at home. The threat of economic collapse loomed large, casting a shadow over the nation's future. The nation's economic engine stalled, grinding to a halt as businesses struggled and consumer confidence plummeted. The path to recovery remained uncertain, with no clear consensus on how to navigate the complex economic challenges ahead. Ultimately, the true cost of the war was felt in every Israeli home, as families grappled with financial stress and uncertainty about the future. The war shattered Israel's sense of unity and security. Constant rocket fire and evacuations turned daily life into a cycle of fear and disruption. The hostage crisis became a bitter dividing line, with families demanding action and others insisting on military pressure. Tens of thousands were displaced, living as refugees in their own country. Frustration and anger grew as the state failed to restore security or offer a plan for rebuilding. Psychological trauma soared, with anxiety and depression affecting all segments of society. Political polarization deepened, fueled by grief and loss. By war's end, Israel was not united in victory but wounded and divided. The war's scars ran deep, leaving the nation uncertain about its future. For Gaza, the war was catastrophic. Entire neighborhoods erased, infrastructure destroyed, and thousands killed. Survivors faced daily struggles for food, water, and shelter, yet their will was not broken. Mutual aid networks and steadfastness, Sumud became acts of defiance. Despite devastation, Hamas claimed symbolic victory by surviving and forcing Israel's withdrawal. The war strengthened Hamas's political standing, especially as the Palestinian Authority appeared powerless. A new fragile unity emerged among Palestinian factions, filling the power vacuum. The shared trauma redefined the national struggle, shifting focus from negotiation to collective resistance. International sympathy grew, but so did the resolve to endure. Gaza's suffering did not lead to surrender, but to a hardened identity. The Palestinian cause was reborn from the ruins. Israel's withdrawal from Gaza in 2025 did not bring peace, but chaos. Gaza was left in ruins, with rival factions vying for control amid humanitarian disaster. The absence of a post-war plan meant instability and violence filled the vacuum. Israel's doctrine of deterrence was shattered, emboldening adversaries like Hezbollah and Iran. Political fallout at home led to bitter elections and demands for accountability. A state inquiry promised to upend the political and military establishment. The nation faced a crisis of confidence and a loss of invincibility. International efforts to rebuild Gaza were hampered by insecurity and lack of leadership. The two-state solution seemed more distant than ever. The seeds of future conflict were sown in the ruins of Gaza. The Gaza War's lessons are stark: military force cannot solve political problems. Israel's belief in a military solution led to defeat, isolation, and humanitarian disaster. Internal division crippled strategy and eroded public trust. For Palestinians, survival brought global sympathy, but at a terrible cost. The cycle of violence risks repeating, with trauma and ruin as the legacy. Yet tragedy could open the door to new thinking. if leaders abandon maximalist demands and seek justice for both sides. Without a political horizon, force leads only to mutual destruction. The future remains unwritten, but the need for peace is clearer than ever.